She's a very nice lady. She lives alone.
18 years ago.
She is the victim of a homicide.
A sadistic murder.
This was the most hideous, sickening crime scene that I'd ever seen.
She died as a result of multiple stab wounds.
This was a particularly vicious homicide.
A police investigation that seems as mysterious as the crime.
She basically had told me that she's afraid that this person would come and kill her in the middle of the night.
A brother and sister's 18-year search for their mother's killer.
They looked at all sorts of avenues. In my opinion, they wasted so much time.
That was the first huge moment.
It should have been solved a decade and a half ago.
Tonight, a better understanding of what happened inside this Bakersfield home almost 2 decades ago. A special edition of 17 News. Who Killed Kathleen Heisey? Now, here's Olivia LaVoice.
For the next 30 minutes, we're going to examine the grisly murder of a Bakersfield woman that remains unsolved, a neglected cold case, a homicide that deserves a fresh look. Our goal, get the case back on the front burner for a brother and sister searching for justice. It's safe to say this murder was horrific and meant by the killer to send a message. We warn you now, what we found will be disturbing to some viewers. In our effort to shed new light on this case, we uncovered new details and raised enough questions to reignite the long-dormant police investigation. 7 months ago, I made my first phone call, submitted my first request for documents, and began a series of interviews with one question, a question that deserves an answer. Who killed Kathleen Heisey? Kathleen Heisey was born and raised in Bakersfield, 4th generation Kern County, daughter of popular city councilman Walt Heisey. Heisey was a prominent name as she grew up in Kern County, but friends say that didn't matter much to the rambunctious little girl.
I knew her all my life, literally. Our grandmothers were very close friends. She and I became extremely close friends in high school. There was 4 of us gals.
Kathleen had dreams that most young women wouldn't dare chase.
She was a character. She was extremely adventurous.
So adventurous. There's stories of her running away and joining the circus. I think she was 19 or 20 when she did that. That is a true story.
Rather than entertain children under the big top, her true calling was helping youth through mentorship and education. Eventually climbing to the rank of principal at Browning Road Elementary School in McFarland, she never lost her youthful joy.
And everybody just loved her. She just smile, happiness, very Pollyanna. Everything's going to be wonderful. It's all going to be good. No matter what was going on, it was going to be great.
It was extremely brutal. It's the most brutal crime scene that I've ever witnessed.
17 News was there July 1st, 1998, shortly after Kathleen Heisey's body was discovered.
Many residents of this neighborhood describe the area as a safe and quiet one.
We're all just in shock. We're a neighborhood that watches out for each other.
Yeah, I know this can be really hard for children.
All of our neighbors here are pretty close.
There was overkill.
Of course, those things sit with you because they're definitely out of the ordinary. It was something that sticks in one's memory.
Early in the murder investigation, the basic questions that should have answers, went without.
We don't know if she may have invited this person in and the person knew her.
A twice-divorced mother of 2, Kathleen left behind then 21-year-old Tim and 25-year-old Lisa, children who grew up realizing a horrific crime would be their mother's legacy.
Any death like this, it's very traumatic, you know, and it's very upsetting, you know, when you work a death like this.
As the Bakersfield police investigation moved forward at a sluggish pace, Kathleen's children held on to the good memories, knowing their mother touched the lives of many.
A great advocate of the kids. She loved them.
Everyone who's hugged me today tells me I look like her, and I couldn't hear it enough right now. A lot is taken away from the amazing life that she had.
In these last couple days, I've gone through her things and gotten pictures of her from her childhood, and
all the way up until recently.
It shows how important someone is to a community when you see how many people take the time to leave their work and go show up to your funeral and pay their respects.
The principal with a heart of gold.
She just had a way with those kids.
The unlikely target for murder.
He was a suspect right out of the gate.
Who killed Kathleen Heisey?
She was stabbed to death, and she was stabbed to death so many times that it was quite clear it wasn't just a simple murder. This was a lot of pent-up rage.
But knowing that the police department is hopefully really giving it a really, I want to say last effort, because they're going to get it. That would be amazing to know that they're doing that.
Who killed Kathleen Heisey?
From a distinguished Kern County family, to her friends, Kathleen Heisey was the personification of happiness. But when the bubbly principal failed to show up to a school meeting, her friend Lynn Runyon stopped by Kathleen's South Bakersfield home to check on her.
There's absolutely no words to describe that. That part is very difficult for me. I was in therapy for 7.5 years after she passed away.
Kathleen was murdered with a large knife.
July 1st, 1998, Kevin Legg was the Bakersfield police detective assigned to Kathleen's murder investigation. The case still haunts him.
And it wasn't a poking type of stab wound. It was like an overhand into the upper torso and then a slash down till you hit a bone, and then you go right or you go left, which is indicative of a knife fighter.
There was also no forced entry. The front door locked, the back door open, no valuables were taken. It's the way the killer left Kathleen.
She had made a comment, according to her friend Lynn, who had found the body, that she wasn't afraid of anything because she had weapons in her home.
Her body was sexually violated with 2 guns, her own guns. Legg adds her killer wanted to send a gruesome message.
A sign that I'm not afraid of you or your weapons.
Surprised, taken aback at what I had seen, the way the body was displayed. And in that regard, I think it just required us to take a little more attention to detail than normal.
Greg Laskowski was also there that day. He was head of the Kern County Crime Lab. Along with other investigators, he spent 15 hours combing the crime scene for clues.
Overkill and a deliberate attempt at display. I've seen that, but not in the extent that was observed in this case.
Legg and Laskowski performed different tasks during the Kathleen Heisey murder investigation. The collection of evidence, interviews with witnesses, led them independently to the same conclusion. Kathleen Heisey knew her killer.
In this instance, there was overkill, which indicated to me that it was personal and that she knew the killer.
But what it basically told me, this murder, and that's exactly what it is, was personal, extremely personal.
Whoever murdered her knew that she had weapons and had purposely removed those weapons and posed them along Kathleen's body that was posed at the foot of the bed.
Although Kathleen's guns were deliberately positioned with her body, they weren't used to commit the crime. In a strange premeditated act, Legg says the killer brought their own murder weapons to the home, knives, and didn't leave them behind.
That was troubling because of the crime scene. The person brought their own tools with them to commit the murder.
The murder was committed, and then there was afterthought as to what to do at the crime scene.
Whoever had murdered her, they knew what they were doing.
A special edition of 17 News. Who killed Kathleen Heisey?
The slow-moving Bakersfield police investigation does little to comfort a brother and sister seeking closure in their mother's murder. Family and friends believe the case has been mishandled since 1998.
Extremely frustrating. I've I've met with 6 sets of detectives, and every time I ask them, like, hey, how are we doing on this case? And of course they're going to tell the son of a victim, like, hey, we're putting everything we can into this case. We really want to get this solved. And there's not a lot of incentive for them to get this solved. And so that's the frustrating part to me.
I'm not sure law enforcement handled everything as they should have.
For so many of us, we just feel it should have been taken care of many, many years ago.
I do hate referring to her as a case, because to me, no, she's not a case that hasn't been solved.
I'm sure there's people out there who we haven't talked to.
As many investigators do, Kevin Legg first looked at Kathleen's romantic life, the people closest to her. Twice divorced, one ex-husband was deceased, the other remarried, living out of state. He was quickly ruled out. Kathleen was seeing a man at the time of her death, a man she met at an educators conference, Bob Taylor.
I was kind of surprised at the beginning to find out that he was married, but again, it had been something that she had had this relationship for a while.
Kathleen didn't share this relationship with many, although close friends say she had recently given Taylor an ultimatum.
I think because it had been going on for a while, I think that it was just something that she wanted to move on from.
2 of Taylor's ex-wives told me Bakersfield police questioned him. The woman married to him at the time says Kathleen's answering machine connected the dots to Taylor. He had left her a message. BPD conducted an interview with Taylor, although police never talked to his ex-wife, and no one can tell us what his alibi was or if he was ever ruled out as a suspect. She and his most recent ex-wife both confirm he's suffering from dementia and memory loss, unable to go on camera for this story. Although Bakersfield police have sealed the murder investigation report, saying the release of any information might hurt their 18-year-long investigation, they did send me a tantalizing cover sheet when denying my public records request. It was really just an index with no new information, except there was a case number I'd never seen. It led to Charles Shannon, a name I'd never heard. That led to a court case which revealed Shannon's middle name, Curran, another prominent Bakersfield name, and the maiden name of Kathleen's mother. Shannon was Kathleen's cousin, a man with a rap sheet including false imprisonment, attempted rape, and failure to register as a sex offender. How was he related to the Kathleen Heisey murder case? Well, his arrest records show Shannon moved from South Dakota back to Bakersfield in the last week of June 1998, the week Kathleen was killed, only to return to his mother's home in Glenville on the 2nd of July, a day after Kathleen's body was discovered. A tip from an informant sent Detective Kevin Legg to Glenville to arrest Shannon for the failure to register. Shannon's sister claims an angry neighbor falsely accused her brother to get him arrested. He was sentenced for a year for not registering as a sex offender. He now lives in Mexico. We reached out to Shannon, but he did not respond.
And I was just amazed, like on day 2 after I learned about this, that the person wasn't apprehended right away.
To Kathleen's son, Tim Heisey, it was never a question of who did it. Now a naval officer, Tim was training at a Marine base when he received the news. He had been home with his mother just a week before her death. He says there was someone in his mother's life who terrified her.
She was so worried to the point where I went to the neighbors and described the guy that had threatened her before she was killed.
Kevin Legg says that someone was close to Kathleen Heisey.
Oh, I certainly have a suspect.
A counselor at her elementary school.
The counselor's name is Lloyd Wakely.
An employee work review between the principal and the counselor.
Essentially based on some past behaviors, some of the things that were said, some of the things that were done. Kathleen felt that this person should not really necessarily continue in his role and his capacity.
The committed educator wanted to stand her ground, but she was fearful.
What always has remained with me is the words that she said to me a few weeks before it happened. Her fear someone was going to come and kill her, and she was pretty explicit.
She told him that she was writing a bad evaluation on him, and when she presented it to him, he flipped out and basically said, if you submit that, that'll be the last thing you ever do. Several days later, she was stabbed to death in her own home.
She paid the ultimate price for turning in the evaluation to have Wakely terminated.
My name's Olivia LaVoice. I'm from 17 News. I'm looking for Lloyd Wakely. I went to the home of the former school counselor, but his wife, Debbie Wakely, insisted we talk about the case in the office of the criminal defense attorney they hired the week after the murder.
The police showed up at our house the next day, I think it was. They started questioning Lloyd, and for some reason, they decided to focus on Lloyd. I never heard any other name come up at all. As far as the timeline, we weren't even in town. We were in the Sequoias all day.
Debbie provided photos of that trip and a gas receipt that she says supports their alibi. She said her husband provided DNA samples and cooperated with a police lie detector test. As for Lloyd's professional relationship with Kathleen,
he respected Kathleen. They got along very well.
In a strange coincidence, Debbie Wakely says her husband Lloyd also is in a nursing home with dementia, as is Bob Taylor, unable to communicate or care for himself. She insists decades of suspicion is the reason for his failing health.
I would not wish anyone to have to live through this, to be dug back up when we've proved our innocence, and obviously our innocence has been proved because the police wouldn't take it to trial. It's absolutely unfathomable to those of us who are law-abiding citizens.
It took some digging, but I found the former school counselor wasn't always law-abiding.
I was the station manager at Northwest Station, a U.S. Post Office station in Oklahoma City.
Lloyd Wakely pled guilty to forcibly assaulting an Oklahoma City postal worker in 1983.
All at once, a loud commotion and a loud bang.
Still living in Oklahoma City, Marshall Hanna remembers the altercation from 33 years ago. Today, he's 94.
And of course, when I heard that, I ran up there, and there was a large fellow there that had come in to check on a piece of express mail that he had mailed. They notified him it hadn't been delivered. And he picked up a new computer that we had, raised it up high in his hands and dropped it on the floor, the concrete floor. He didn't run or anything, but he walked to his car. Well, I followed him out. He didn't get in his vehicle. He reached in and got a gun, a pistol. And he come back to the back of the car where I was, and he stuck that pistol right up between my eyes within 3 feet. And I really thought he was going to shoot me. I later found out that he was a school teacher. After the trial was over, they just slapped his wrist, and you could tell that guy was very unstable.
Lloyd Wakely received a 4-year suspended sentence and was forced to seek psychiatric help.
I knew that guy was a ticking time bomb after what he did.
We also came across 2 road rage incidents. One in 1998, a few months before Kathleen's murder. The police report states Wakely approached a car with a sword, warning passengers if they weren't careful, someone would cut their hearts out. At the time, Wakely denied making those comments, claiming the sword was for his own protection. No charges were ever filed. Then in 1999, another road rage altercation. Witnesses say he confronted a driver with a bullwhip and beat him. In this case, Lloyd Wakely was charged with disturbing the peace. But Detective Kevin Legg, still working the Heisey case from the previous year, insisted the charges be increased to assault with a deadly weapon. The charges in the 1999 road rage incident were eventually dropped. Records show Legg was able to get a warrant for Wakely's DNA. However, any DNA results from that sample were never shared with Detective Legg before he retired in 2000. During my interview with Debbie Wakely, she says they have never been provided an outcome from the testing either.
I know Detective Taskins told us Lloyd would always be a suspect on the back burner until they solved the murder.
We want to make it clear Lloyd Wakely has never been convicted of a crime in Kern County, and no one has been arrested for the murder of Kathleen Heisey.
It is the judgment and order of this court that you shall suffer the death penalty, said penalty to be inflicted within the walls of the state prison at San Quentin, California.
After months of research, we feel we've learned a lot about this cold case. But just when we thought we were done, an avalanche of new information is coming in every single day, including another person of interest, Michael Charles Brown, a convicted murderer on death row. In 2000, Brown was found guilty of stabbing a woman to death in Bakersfield. Now we're looking into his background and if he's related to the Kathleen Heisey murder case.
A special edition of 17 News. Who killed Kathleen Heisey? An 18-year-old case with no arrest. A special edition of 17 News. Who killed Kathleen Heisey?
In an attempt to learn more about exactly what went on during the 1998 investigation, including specific DNA information, we requested copies of police records and search warrants. Our requests were repeatedly denied, and the records remain sealed. The immediate details of how the Bakersfield police investigation has unfolded is still a mystery. I went to the source. I scheduled a meeting with the Bakersfield Police Department. I spoke with the case's current investigator and the head of the detective division. They refused to go on camera, and all they would say is the 18-year-old investigation continues to be a priority. And they have DNA recovered from the crime scene, but wouldn't reveal any details. What often becomes public information in a murder case, evidence collected at the scene, suspect and witness interviews, remains sealed. The Kathleen Heisey case was cold, very cold, when I began asking questions. A dormant case that held little hope for the children, family, and friends of the dedicated elementary school principal. Seemingly no chance of an arrest would be made.
For years, I've battled with this frustration about their mishandling of the case.
As time goes by, Tim's memories of his mom will never fade. His grief has not subsided. His resolve to find his mother's killer continues, even if he's on his own.
I don't support vigilante justice, but with a police department that has a murder solve rate of 41%, I find it hard to tell people to just sit tight when something catastrophic happens to their family and say, hey, just trust that the police and the court system will take care of this.
3 months after I started asking questions, I sent a letter to Police Chief Greg Williamson, updating him on what I had found and reminding him of the Heisey family's continuing grief. 2 weeks later, more than 18 years after the killing, police assigned a detective full-time to re-examine the case. They won't tell us the status of the rekindled investigation. They wouldn't let me interview the detective. But late last month, Lisa Heisey says an investigator came to her home near Seattle to take a DNA sample. It was the first time that BPD had reached out to her in 9 years. The next week, I was summoned to a meeting with the top brass of the police department. They refused to let me bring a camera and told me no new details could be disclosed. We wanted to know the details of the DNA evidence, why they needed a sample from Lisa, and if they've had Wakely's DNA for 16 years, have they tested it? If so, what are the results? And when it comes to the married man she was seeing, what was his alibi? And why was his wife never questioned? Those are just a few questions we are still waiting to have answered. They did say the new detective has reviewed every report in the case and is submitting old evidence for new examination by the Kern County Crime Lab. We're not done here. We're going to continue to pursue answers.
Instead of remembering her life, you're remembering her death and wondering, will it ever be solved?
Lisa Heisey invited me to the site of the family cabin in Glenville, bringing her daughter named Kathleen to see her grandmother's resting place for the first time.
Goodness. There's so many countless ways she's missed. There's huge moments that have hit me. My brother graduating from the Naval Academy, huge. That was the first huge moment.
I never thought it would be more than 2 or 3 years, and I really did think that this would be solved.
We need it to end.
I hate that someone else decided to pick up that pen to write the last chapter of her life.
I know so many people, and myself and my family would love to just have this end.
I'm not giving up the fight for her.
We believe Kathleen Heisey deserves justice. Her son Tim, her daughter Lisa deserve answers. We will continue to ask questions for the Heisey family. We will continue to follow the Bakersfield Police investigation, pushing for answers, making it possible to one day find out who killed Kathleen Heisey. I'm Olivia LaVoice for 17 News.
If you have information that could help Bakersfield Police solve this case, call Detective Spoor at 661-326-3535 or Secret Witness to Remain Anonymous at 661-322-4040. To learn more about Kathleen Heisey and the investigation into her murder, visit our website, kerngoldenempire.com, and click on the Kathleen Heisey tab.